Ominous, deep tone. With weighty pauses, the army of Israel stood paralyzed. Pause in the valley of Elah. Fear had a name, Goliath, a giant nearly 10 feet tall, encased in a shell of bronze, hurling blasphemies against the living God. 40 days, morning and evening, his voice thundered across the hills, and every echo crushed the hearts of the soldiers. Saul's chosen warriors cowered like shepherdless sheep. Voice more choked the people of the promise, cornered by a single man. Suddenly, a whisper of hope. But in the quiet of Bethlehem's hills, far from the trenches, there was a boy, with reverence, David, Jesse's youngest son, forgotten by men, but anointed in secret by God, a shepherd who carried no sword, yet had already strangled lions and bears, while defending helpless sheep. He walked with God, as if the giant hadn't even been born yet. Solemn, decreeing tone, and then, sent by his father with bread and cheese for his brothers on the front lines, David heard the taunt. Pause. The same roar that froze. Veterans lit a holy fury in the shepherd's chest. His question rang out like an inverted sentence. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? Brief silence, and against all military protocol, David stood before Saul and declared, "Your servant will go and fight this Philistine," an insane order coming from a boy. With a jolt of reality, pace quickens. Picture the scene: a ruddy, smooth-skinned youth, unarmored, standing before the king's throne. Tone of scorn. Then narrative: Saul tried to dress him in his own coat of mail, helmet and sword. But David could barely walk. He took it all off, like someone trading human strength for the madness of faith. And then he chose 5 smooth stones from the brook, a shepherd's sling, nothing more. The generals must have thought suicide, an infant against a war machine. But David didn't retreat, because he believed more in the invisible God than in the visible giant. Transition, softer and more mysterious voice. And then, pause, the valley fell mute. Effect: sound of a breeze suspending time. The 2 mountains, packed with troops, held their breath as the shepherd descended the slope. Goliath, seeing a boy with a staff, roared curses by his gods. "Am I a dog, that you come to me with sticks?" The insult floated in the air like venom, but David kept walking. Dramatic crescendo as the distance shrank, voice breathless, quickening. The boy ran toward the battle line. No army followed him. No shield bearer covered him, only the name of the Lord of hosts, thundering inside him. In one fluid motion, he reached into his pouch, took out a stone, and fitted it into the sling. Solemn pause. The whir of leather sliced the air. The stone kissed the giant's forehead, and the bronze, the shield, the mockers, everything collapsed. Deep and definitive voice. God himself brought down the giant, using a river-washed bullet, impactful, cold. The ground trembled. The Philistine champion's body crashed face first into the dirt, eyes glazed, the mouth that blasphemed now filled with dust. Long pause. The silence of an impossible death froze the ranks. Then David, with no sword of his own, ran to the corpse, drew the enemy's weapon, and cut off the head of the defiance. Terror switched sides. The Philistines fled, chased by an army that had been reborn. Calmer, claustrophobic in the stillness of that moment, the shepherd stood, holding the giant's head, his fingers stained with blood, his heart pounding not with pride, but with the awe of someone who had seen heaven fight for him. The only weapon he had was a voice. "You come to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts." Gentle, tender, until the echo of victory raced through Israel. Women poured from the cities with tambourines, singing, "Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s, almost whispering, and in those leftover stones in the pouch, the nation read the alphabet of hope. God doesn't need lined-up armies. He only needs a lined-up heart. Now epic, stirring, when the valley returned to silence, David didn't build a throne, voice broken with emotion. He had already built an altar in the pasture, while no one was watching. And there, in the solitude of the sheep, he learned that the battle is the Lord's. That's why, before the giant, there was no fear. There was worship disguised as courage. The shepherd became the unlikely champion of history. Powerful voice, covenant tone, and the promise that bloomed from that place was not for David alone, but for everyone who refuses to fight with the wrong weapons, not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord. The valley of Elah became the cradle of an eternal principle. The giant was real, but the stone was only the instrument. The true warrior was the God who guided the stone and toppled human pride with a crack. Strong closing, looking into the eyes of the viewer, David won the war without ever having worn armor. The sling was fragile, the stone was laughable, but the name of the Lord was an earthquake in the forehead of impossibility. His story screams to this day deep and direct voice. Stop fighting battles. You were never meant to win by your own strength. The unarmed obedience of a man who knows his God can turn a valley of terror into a stage for miracle. Final pause. Goliath fell with a stone. But what truly brought him down was the faith of a boy who dared to believe that heaven fights for those who refuse to bow.